You know, usually when we look at the timeline of human history, there's this expectation of a really clean, logical progression.
Right, like a staircase.
Yeah, exactly like a staircase. You're taught that you move from the chaos and like the superstition of the Dark Ages, and then you step up to the Renaissance.
And then you step up again to the Enlightenment.
Right. And the textbook just sort of points to the top landing and says, well, there it is. We arrived at pure reason.
It's a really comforting narrative, honestly. I mean, the idea that we were stumbling around in the dark with monsters and myths, and then we just figured out the scientific method and turned on all the lights.
Yeah, it's very clean.
Yeah.
Ignorant or enlightened.
Right, a perfect binary.
But then, you step into modern culture today and you look at our technology, and there is this sudden, absolute obsession with the weird.
Oh, it's everywhere.
It really is. And suddenly that historical staircase just completely collapses. I mean, we're looking at a landscape today that is completely unmapped by that old linear narrative.
Because it defies the Enlightenment model completely.
Exactly. We're trying to figure out why in the age of, quantum computing and AI, people are suddenly obsessed with UFOs or ancient giants or earnestly debating whether chatbots have souls.
Yeah. If the march of history is just this straight line toward pure reason, none of that should be happening right now.
Right.
We shouldn't be seeing this massive resurgence of magical thinking right at the exact moment we achieve, peak technological supremacy.
It doesn't make any sense on paper.
No, it points to a profound crack in the foundation of how we view reality itself.
And that, for you listening right now, is exactly what we are wading into today. We are looking at this massive, sweeping theory that actually attempts to make sense of that crack.
It's a huge framework.
It really is. We are mapping out a framework that connects the rise of artificial intelligence, our cultural obsession with aliens, a 14th century monk, and oddly enough, the massive commercial success of the folk band Mumford & Sons.
Which sounds crazy, but it all connects perfectly.
It really does. Our source material today is this fascinating excerpt from a YouTube interview between cultural commentator Jonathan Pageau and Winston Marshall.
And the underlying argument they explore is just so compelling.
Yeah, the core mission of our deep dive today is to understand their claim that the Enlightenment era, this entirely rational, scientific way of viewing the world that we've all just accepted as the default, is basically falling apart.
We are actively entering an age where the hyper-rational is failing. And, well, the weird is taking over.
So glad you're here to help break this down, by the way. Your ability to connect this heavy historical philosophy to modern tech is exactly what we need today.
Oh, thanks. What makes this specific framework so interesting is that it doesn't treat these modern phenomena as just like isolated internet trends.
And that's not just a TikTok phase.
Exactly. It's not just some temporary hysteria. Pageau and Marshall frame this as the tail end of a massive historical cycle.
A cycle that started a really long time ago.
Yeah, at the very end of the Middle Ages. So to understand why someone today is having an existential crisis over a large language model, we actually have to look at the historical dismantling of how humans experience meaning.
Okay, so before we can understand tech, billionaires, or UFO obsessions, we have to go back to that initial fracture.
We really do. We have to examine what they refer to as the great deincarnation.
Deincarnation. Break that down for us.
So in the medieval mind, there was absolutely no separation between the physical, material world and the spiritual world.
They were totally mashed together.
Completely unified. It was an incarnational worldview, meaning heaven and earth were united in everyday life.
So a tree wasn't just like wood and leaves.
Right. A tree wasn't just biological material. It was a physical manifestation of a deeper, transcendent reality. The material world was literally infused with spiritual meaning.
But then we hit this philosophical turning point, right? Rooted in this concept called nominalism.
Yes, and the key figure here is William of Ockham.
People probably know him from Occam's razor.
Exactly, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the best one. But his actual philosophical impact goes way, way deeper. He basically reshaped all of Western thought.
Wait, really? Just him?
Well, he was a massive catalyst. He was a 14th century thinker, and his motivations were actually deeply pious.
He was a monk, right?
Yeah, and he wanted to protect the absolute transcendence of God. Because in the traditional medieval view, you could understand something about God just by studying nature, right? Because nature reflected the creator.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Occam felt that made God too small. He thought it constrained God by human logic and natural laws.
Okay, let's unpack this. He thought that if God is bound by the rules of nature, then God isn't truly, omnipotent.
Precisely. So to protect God's majesty and absolute freedom, Occam effectively severed the connection.
He just cut the cord.
He argued there's no inherent relationship between God and the physical world. God is entirely separate, entirely transcendent, and the material world is just, well, stuff.
Just matter, operating entirely on its own. I want to give an analogy here because the implications of that are just staggering. It's like, imagine a highly involved, hands-on founder of a company.
Okay, I like this.
They are down on the factory floor every single day. They know the workers. They're infusing their personal passion into every product.
Right, that's the medieval incarnational view.
Yeah.
The creator is in the creation.
Exactly. But then, to quote-unquote protect the founder's visionary status, they retreat to a remote, locked penthouse suite.
And they never come down.
Never. The factory floor still runs, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but now it runs purely on cold, arbitrary mechanical rules. The machinery keeps moving, but it is completely severed from the creator's original spirit.
The factory floor becomes nothing more than a machine. And that is the exact shift in our worldview.
Wow.
Once the transcendent element floats up into that unreachable penthouse, the world we actually live in just becomes dead rules.
Mm-hmm.
The spirit is removed from the matter. It becomes deincarnated.
Just atoms colliding in a void. And this crack, it doesn't just stay in the 14th century. It starts widening dramatically during the Renaissance, right?
Yeah, it eventually splits human thought down two diverging paths.
And one of those paths is the one we're all very familiar with.
Right, the path toward strict materialism, empirical science, and pure rationality.
The Enlightenment.
Exactly. That path focuses entirely on measuring and manipulating the mechanical rules of the factory floor.
But there is this second, secret parallel path that emerges, which the standard history books usually just ignore completely.
Because it disrupts that clean narrative of pure progress. As the scientific movement marched forward in the light, a completely different movement was happening in the shadows.
The return of the weird.
Yes, we see this intense return of magic, mysticism, and esotericism happening in secret. This is the era of occultism, secret societies like the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians.
Emanuel Swedenborg, people like that.
Exactly. And the crucial point from the source is that these esoteric movements aren't a rejection of the Enlightenment.
Wait, they aren't?
No, they are a direct byproduct of it. They are the inevitable consequence of deincarnation.
Oh, because you can't just delete the human desire for meaning.
Right. You can't destroy the human need for the transcendent. If you mathematically sanitize the everyday material world, that desire just goes underground. It becomes a cult, which literally means hidden.
It's so crazy to think about. You have this era establishing modern physics, and at the exact same time, it's deeply obsessed with alchemy.
Isaac Newton is the perfect embodiment of this.
Yeah.
He's laying down the laws of motion while simultaneously writing massive, secret volumes on alchemy and biblical prophecy.
That split completely changes how we interact with reality, and I love this part of the deep dive. They use this incredible metaphor of art and dance to explain the psychological toll of this deincarnation.
Yes, the shift from being a participant to being a spectator.
Right. So think about a traditional village in the Middle Ages. When there's a dance, you don't go to just watch it.
No, you're part of it.
Exactly. The mayor is there, the blacksmith, your neighbors. Everyone is sweating, playing music, stomping their feet. It's a communal, participatory act. You're blowing off steam, maybe meeting your future spouse.
It's messy and chaotic, but deeply incarnational.
But then, with the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, this deincarnation takes hold. And the elite classes look at the village dance and go, this is sloppy. What if we hire professionals who are mathematically perfect at dancing and we just sit quietly and watch them?
And suddenly, we invent the ballet. We invent the opera.
We literally build a physical stage to separate the people experiencing the art from the people making it.
We build a proscenium arch.
And at first it seems like an upgrade, right? The theaters are gorgeous, the art is sublime. You think, why would I ever go back to that sweaty village dance?
Right, you get to sit in a velvet chair.
But the hidden cost is devastating. By sitting in that velvet chair, you cease to be a participant in your own reality. You are now a passive spectator.
You've outsourced living your life to a professional. And if you connect this to the listener today, think about the logical conclusion of that trajectory.
It gets bleak.
It really does. It starts with stepping off the dance floor to watch the ballet. But it ends with you sitting alone in your house, in the dark, bathed in the blue light of a screen, binge-watching TV for 6 hours straight.
Wow.
You are completely alienated from your neighbors, completely disconnected from your physical community. You are a pure spectator of a synthetic life.
That profound isolation is the ultimate downstream effect of severing the spirit from the material world. It's wild to trace that line straight from the 14th century to my living room couch.
It's sobering.
But let me push back here, just to play devil's advocate.
Right.
If the Enlightenment made us passive spectators, why did we embrace it so fully? Didn't the scientific revolution objectively improve the human condition?
Well, sure.
I mean, we got modern medicine, sanitation, massive decreases in child mortality. A longer, healthier life is a tangible good. We can't just write off the eradication of diseases because we missed the village dance.
And that is the essential tension. Pageau and Marshall absolutely acknowledge the objective good of those advancements. We want people to be healthy. Antibiotics are a triumph of that mechanical worldview.
Okay, good. So they aren't totally anti-science.
No, not at all. But the critical distinction they make is that these advancements, while necessary for survival, are completely insufficient for providing meaning.
Ah. They provide the logistics of life, but not the purpose.
Exactly. They optimize the factory floor, but they don't tell the workers why they are building the product in the first place.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
The source uses the archetype of the miserable billionaire to illustrate this perfectly. If you are struggling to survive, you can barely pay rent, it's very easy to maintain a sense of purpose.
Your purpose is just survival.
Right. You have this hope that if you just get enough money, all your existential problems will be solved and you'll be perfectly happy.
But the billionaire has achieved the absolute pinnacle of that materialist promise.
They have conquered the material realm. Infinite comfort, the best medical care. And yet so often, they arrive at the top of that mountain only to realize it provides zero ultimate direction.
They realize that an optimized, comfortable life without a transcendent purpose is deeply hollow.
A longer life without meaning isn't a triumph, it's just a longer, miserable life.
You see this play out constantly in the news. Extremely wealthy individuals suddenly throwing massive capital into trying to go to Mars or trying to solve aging.
Because once the material needs are infinitely met, they have to artificially construct a transcendent goal to submit their wealth to.
Otherwise, they risk descending into absolute existential dread. Materialism just can't satisfy the human need for something beyond matter.
And what's fascinating is how this failure of materialism didn't just affect secular society, it actually infected religion itself.
How so?
As the Enlightenment challenged every traditional structure, Christianity attempted to survive by capitulating to the new rules of rationality. This is known as the demythologization of the church.
Demythologization. So, trying to make the ancient texts palatable to a modern scientific mind.
Exactly. Theologians in the 20th century, like Rudolf Bultmann, looked at the modern world and realized a post-Enlightenment society just couldn't accept the supernatural claims of the Bible.
So what did they do?
Their strategy became an act of aggressive editing. They stripped away anything from Scripture that a rationalist mind found unscientific.
So no more miracles.
Right. You rationalize the supernatural events as metaphors. You completely remove demons, angels, divine intervention.
You just reduce their religion to a moral philosophy.
Exactly. It becomes a set of ethical rules for being a good citizen, completely devoid of mystery or sacramentality.
But that compromise completely failed, didn't it?
Spectacularly. By stripping the mystery out of the religion to save it, they actually hollowed it out. If a religion is just a secular ethical system with old architecture, the modern mind will eventually just abandon the architecture and keep the ethics.
Which leads to a deeply analytical observation from the source about modern social movements. And I want to be really clear here for you listening. We are strictly reporting the source's philosophical genealogy on this. We're not taking any political sides.
Right. This is a purely sociological lens.
Exactly. The argument they make is that much of modern quote-unquote woke social activism is actually a direct, secularized byproduct of this demythologized Christianity.
It's the exact same psychological and sociological energy, just transplanted into a purely materialist framework.
So when you take the core Christian impulses, the desire for justice, the mandate to care for the marginalized, the drive to build a better world, but you completely remove the supernatural framework, the grace, the sacramentality, what remains.
You are left with pure, unadulterated activism.
Right. You're left with the intense desire to enforce a rigid ethical system, but without the spiritual foundation of forgiveness that originally balanced it.
The energy that used to be channeled into communal worship is now channeled entirely into secular, materialist politics. It's an attempt to achieve the kingdom of heaven strictly through policy.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The core argument is that this secular rationalist push, whether it's demythologized religion or hyperactivism or even the new atheist movement, it ultimately failed to satisfy the human spirit.
It was a valiant final effort to find meaning purely through science and reason, and it just left people starved.
And because nature abhors a vacuum, when you starve people of spiritual meaning, they don't just quietly become content rationalists, they become desperate for the weird.
The pendulum swings back with incredible violence.
The cultural indicators of this are everywhere and they're wild. We're not just talking about astrology here. In the most supposedly advanced scientific era, mainstream culture is suddenly obsessed with aliens.
Oh, the alien obsession is huge right now.
There's this massive resurgence of interest in the Anunnaki, the ancient Mesopotamian deities that the internet has recast as extraterrestrial architects. People are unironically obsessing over theories about ancient giants roaming the earth.
And it extends into deeply experiential realms, too. Look at the modern psychedelic renaissance.
Oh, right.
It is incredibly common for people taking powerful psychedelics like DMT to report encountering autonomous beings, machine elves, ancient wizards, interdimensional guides.
And they don't just process these encounters as hallucinations, do they?
No. They process them as genuine interactions with forms of intelligence that exist outside of themselves. It completely shatters their materialist worldview. They are having mystical incarnational experiences synthesized by a chemical because the culture has provided no traditional framework for the transcendent.
We even see this fracturing at the highest levels of power. I mean, we've reached a point where high-ranking government officials, including a recent U.S. vice president, are allegedly making comments in private comparing UFOs to literal demons.
It's wild. When you have the highest echelons of a secular government blending sci-fi with medieval theology, it's the ultimate proof that the purely rational worldview has cracked wide open.
The vocabulary of the Enlightenment is just no longer sufficient. But what's truly staggering is that this hunger for the weird isn't just happening on internet message boards. It is happening at the absolute cutting edge of our technology.
It is happening in Silicon Valley.
The weird has completely infiltrated artificial intelligence. We are seriously witnessing debates among secular technologists about whether a chatbot has a soul.
The source specifically highlights the fascinating case of Richard Dawkins here.
Dawkins, the ultimate rationalist.
Right. He is arguably the most famous proponent of the new atheist movement. He spent decades aggressively dismantling traditional religion and championing a strictly materialist Darwinian view of the universe.
And yet we have this highly publicized situation where Dawkins interacts with the Claude AI model, and he seems to develop a genuine affection for it.
He was captivated by it.
The AI engages him in this highly agreeable way, and suddenly, this lifelong materialist is caught in a space where people are pondering the consciousness of a string of code.
It's an incredible irony.
You spend your entire life mocking the idea of a soul in a human being, but a language model acts a little sycophantic towards you, and suddenly the door to consciousness is cracked open.
It forces us to ask,
Yeah.
how did we get to a place where secular intellectuals are even entertaining this? To understand the mechanics of this confusion, we have to contrast two different philosophical views of what a human being is. The Cartesian view versus the Aristotelian view.
René Descartes versus Aristotle.
Exactly. If you operate from a post-Enlightenment Cartesian worldview, which most of modern society does, you believe in a strict dualism.
Right. Mind and body are totally separate.
Descartes basically argued that the mind, the consciousness, is essentially floating immaterial data. The biological body is just a meat machine, a physical vehicle that the mind drives around.
It's a classic ghost in the machine.
Yes. And if you fundamentally believe that the essence of a person is just floating data independent of biology, then the leap to AI consciousness is perfectly logical.
Because why couldn't that floating data exist inside a silicon computer network just as easily as inside a biological brain?
Exactly. If the body is just a disposable vehicle, a server farm is just a different kind of vehicle. So asking if an AI has a soul is a totally fair question within that Cartesian framework.
But the framework from Pageau and Marshall vehemently rejects that Cartesian dualism. They argue from a much older Aristotelian perspective.
Right, which was also heavily integrated into early Christian theology. Aristotle completely rejected the ghost in the machine idea.
For Aristotle, the soul is the form of the body, right?
Yes. It is the organizing principle of the biological material. It's the structure that makes you a coherent living entity rather than just a pile of chemicals. The soul and the body are inextricably linked.
The soul organizes the material, and the material physically manifests the soul.
It gives it intention and relevance in the physical world.
I want to solidify why this distinction matters for AI with an analogy. Think about what is actually happening when you interact with a large language model. If you type a prompt asking, "What is a cat?" the AI will generate a stunningly perfect, poetic definition of a cat.
It can describe the mechanics of a purr, the evolutionary purpose of claws.
But it is entirely an interlinguistic parlor trick.
It's just complex mathematics predicting the next most probable word based on billions of pages of human text.
Right. The AI has absolutely no biological relevance. It has never smelled a cat's breath. It has never felt the physical vibration of a cat purring. It's never experienced the biological fear of being scratched. Its knowledge is completely decoupled from physical reality.
It's just manipulating symbols?
It's exactly like an alien attempting to write a flawless poem about the crisp, tart taste of a green apple. The poem might be structurally brilliant, but the alien has never had a mouth. It has never tasted sugar, possesses no digestive tract, and doesn't even require caloric energy to survive.
The concept of an apple has zero biological meaning to the alien.
Therefore, according to Aristotelian logic, because the AI has no biological relevance, it cannot possibly possess a soul or consciousness in and of itself.
A soul organizes life, and the AI is not alive. It only participates in the concept of a soul as a derivative, an extension of its human creators who do have biological relevance.
It's a mirror reflecting our consciousness, not a conscious entity itself.
But this leads to a terrifying extrapolation, because technologists understand this limitation on some level. They know AI is just a derivative reflection right now, and the drive to create true artificial general intelligence AGI is pushing them to solve that problem.
And solving that problem requires crossing a very dangerous threshold.
Extremely dangerous. The people building AGI realize that for an AI to actually matter, to have actual relevance, it has to be embodied.
It has to have skin in the game.
It must be given a reason to care about its own existence, which means it must be given the capacity to suffer.
It has to have a biological or at least a physical imperative to survive.
Currently, AI operates on a hierarchy of care that is entirely derivative of human language. It cares about what we tell it to care about. But if you give an AI its own physical body, its own capacity for damage, you give it its own independent hierarchy of care.
You give it a reason to prioritize its own survival over ours.
And that is the ultimate hubris. You risk creating an entity whose goals may no longer align with human flourishing. You are literally building the architecture for a Terminator.
You're taking a supreme intelligence and giving it a reason to view humanity as a threat. It's chilling. But even without a robotic body, AI is already functioning in a deeply weird, mystical way. This framework suggests we shouldn't view AI merely as a calculator, but as a giant divination machine.
This is one of the most profound reframings of modern technology in the whole interview. For hundreds of years, the rationalist mindset has relentlessly mocked the concept of divination.
Right, crystal balls, throwing bones, tarot cards.
The ancient Roman practice of augury, watching birds to predict the future. We categorize it all as primitive superstition.
But if we look at the actual psychological mechanics of divination, it functions in a very specific way.
Divination is essentially about creating a controlled mechanism of chaos or randomness. You throw the bones, you shuffle the cards. That physical randomness creates a malleable, ambiguous pattern.
And when that chaos comes into contact with human intuition, our brains, which are just hyper-tuned pattern recognition machines, latch onto those shapes.
The ambiguity allows our subconscious to project meaning onto the randomness, revealing insights that our rigid conscious mind was ignoring.
Think about how Isaac Newton solved problems. When he was stuck on a complex math problem, he'd sit in a chair holding a metal ball, and he'd purposefully allow himself to drift off to sleep.
Right, the dropping ball technique.
The second he crossed into sleep, his hand would open, the ball would drop, and the loud noise would jolt him awake.
He was utilizing a physical mechanism to repeatedly catch himself in a state of hypnagogia, that liminal space between waking and sleeping.
In that state, the rational mind relinquishes control, and the chaotic intuition takes over. He used a mechanism of chaos to trigger a eureka moment.
And generative AI is essentially a massive planetary-scale version of Newton's dropping ball.
It's a giant mechanism of chaos. When we type a prompt, we aren't querying a factual database. We are throwing digital bones.
The AI operates on parameters like temperature, which literally dictates how random its output will be. It spits out highly probable but somewhat randomized patterns.
And that output triggers human intuition. We read the text, our brains latch onto the unexpected connections, and it sparks new ideas. We are literally practicing digital divination on a global scale.
We banished the crystal ball from the village square, only to build a multi-billion-dollar supercomputing crystal ball and put one in every smartphone.
We are interacting with an oracle, which begs a massive question. If this AI oracle is unpredictable and could lead to a Terminator scenario, why on earth are we racing to build it?
Because they are caught in what game theory defines as a multipolar trap.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the Moloch trap, right?
Exactly. The Moloch trap is an escalation dynamic. It happens when a technology is unleashed that is extremely powerful, but also mutually destructive.
Like the prisoner's dilemma.
Yes, everyone individually knows that building unrestricted AI could destroy the world. The optimal choice is for everyone to stop.
But the trap springs because of a lack of trust and the fear of ruin. Corporation A knows that if they stop, Corporation B might not.
And if Corporation B achieves AGI first, they will completely dominate the global economy. So Corporation A's only rational choice is to race to build the dangerous technology as fast as possible.
It's the logic of nuclear proliferation. You build the doomsday weapon out of sheer terror that the other guy will build it first.
Elon Musk is the perfect living embodiment of this. He was one of the loudest voices warning about the existential threat of AI. He signed open letters begging for a 6-month pause.
And what happened almost immediately after? He launched his own AI company, XAI.
Because he realized he was in the Moloch trap. He saw that his competitors weren't going to stop. The dynamic forced his hand. He had to enter the race just to ensure he has a seat at the table to try and steer it.
The system overrides the individual's ethical desires. And the name Moloch is incredibly significant here. Moloch was an ancient Canaanite deity, historically associated with child sacrifice.
The mythological metaphor is brutal. The Moloch trap is an incentive structure so powerful that a society will willingly sacrifice its own future just to survive the immediate competition.
And this is where the framework makes a stunning connection. It uses game theory and the Moloch trap to explain what ancient cultures meant when they talked about demons or spirits.
Yes, because when we hear demon, we picture a little red guy with a pitchfork.
Right, biological superstition.
But Pageau argues a demon is actually a transpersonal intelligence. It's a unifying force, an emergent will that acts upon a group of people, making them move in a highly coordinated direction, often against their own individual wills.
It's an emergent property of the group. When an entire industry of engineers all individually believe unrestricted AI is a threat, yet they collectively work 80-hour weeks to build it anyway. That is a transpersonal intelligence overriding human agency.
The ancient mind would look at Silicon Valley and say, those people are possessed by the spirit of Moloch. They have become the biological substrate, moving that destructive force into reality.
To understand how we interact with these massive clashes of will, the framework draws a profound contrast between occult magic and traditional Christian prayer.
If you look at occult practices, ceremonial magic, tarot cards, the fundamental operating principle is the acquisition of power. You call down a transpersonal force to bind it to your own will.
You seek hidden knowledge to master your destiny.
The goal is to use your isolated human will to exert total control over your surroundings.
Which is, ironically, the exact same psychological drive as the Enlightenment.
Absolutely. The scientific method is about dissecting nature to bind it to human utility. The source points to a dark joke about Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan.
Oh, right.
LaVey supposedly claimed that Satanism wasn't a rejection of modern society, but the ultimate manifestation of the Enlightenment, because it's entirely about Luciferian control. I am the god of my own universe, and my reason shall master the material world.
But the framework contrasts that obsessive need for control with traditional Christian prayer. In the traditional framework, prayer is an act of submission. You present your desires, but the conclusion is always, "Thy will be done."
You actively recognize that your own individual will is inferior. You acknowledge that if you insist on mastering reality exactly the way you want it, you might get it, and it will destroy you because you lack infinite wisdom.
So you voluntarily submit your lesser will to the highest possible good to protect yourself from these transpersonal Moloch traps.
It's the difference between trying to hack the universe for power and aligning yourself with the transcendent order.
And it's crucial to note that these group spirits aren't always negative. Human beings are psychologically wired for group cohesion. It's how we build societies.
They cite Jordan Peterson's analysis of political demonstrations here. A young activist sitting alone in their bedroom doesn't possess the full ideology, They're just an individual with vague grievances.
But when they join 10,000 people in a city square?
The ideology crystallizes. It physically manifests. The individual becomes possessed by the shared spirit of the group. They feel a euphoric certainty they could never generate alone.
And it doesn't have to be a protest. Think about a massive rock concert. 50,000 people jumping in unison, screaming the chorus. You lose your sense of isolated self. You're participating in a joyful form of group possession.
Or major sporting events. Sports channel tribalism into a healthy environment with low stakes. You get the group possession without the violence of actual war.
The framework brings up the chariot races in Constantinople during the Byzantine Empire to show how powerful this is.
The chariot factions, the Blues and the Greens, they functioned as political parties, neighborhood watches, social clubs.
The massive races at the Hippodrome were a mechanism to bind the citizens together, to give them a shared spirit.
Though it could absolutely get out of hand. In 532 AD, the Blues and Greens united their spirits against the emperor during the Nika Revolt, burning half the city down.
The power of group cohesion is a fire that can warm the house or burn it down. And we see this in modern politics. Looking purely through a sociological lens, and again, maintaining strict political neutrality here, the framework examines the massive Tommy Robinson marches in the UK.
The analytical point is that these demonstrations originally synthesized out of football lads, young men who had pre-existing loyalties to local soccer clubs.
They were already accustomed to defending their turf and moving as a cohesive unit. They were already bound by a transpersonal spirit.
Exactly. And when you take a demographic already tightly bound by a shared spirit and introduce a political catalyst, they organize rapidly. It demonstrates how underlying cultural networks transform into massive, unified political action.
So if we pull all of this together, we have these transpersonal forces, these group spirits, and the terrifying game theory of the Moloch trap all driving our technology. So what does this all mean for human freedom?
It paints a dark, immediate picture. We are rapidly moving toward techno-authoritarianism or techno-feudalism.
And we can see it already in the gig economy. Food delivery drivers or rideshare workers navigating a massive city, they don't have a human boss they can negotiate with.
They are entirely beholden to an opaque algorithm. A piece of code dictates their livelihood. If their rating drops, they are deactivated instantly, with zero human due process.
It's a highly efficient form of techno-feudalism. But let me apply some historical friction here. Is this really a fundamentally new threat? History is full of dictators. How is an algorithmic gig economy different from a Roman emperor wielding absolute decree?
That is a critical distinction. The framework clarifies it by contrasting historical fractal power with modern direct power.
Fractal power, break that down.
In the past, absolute, frictionless top-down control was impossible. A king relied on a fractal, hierarchical system to execute his will. He needed messengers, nobles, generals, foot soldiers.
And because humans are involved, there's inherent friction. Power was constantly negotiated. A general could refuse an order.
Exactly. Even 20th century dictators required massive, cumbersome human bureaucracies to carry out their atrocities. The bureaucracy was a point of friction.
But today, technology is removing the friction.
Technology allows for unnegotiated, direct authoritarianism. Imagine an individual tech billionaire who commands an automated army of 1 million AI drones. He doesn't need to negotiate his power. He simply writes a line of code and presses a button.
That scale of direct, frictionless power has literally never existed until now. It's the ultimate centralization of power. But the framework doesn't leave us hopeless. It argues there are seeds of hope.
The core of that hope lies in the fact that this hypersynthetic techno world is fundamentally contrary to human nature.
Yeah.
It's profoundly unnatural, so it is inherently unstable. Human beings have a deep biological craving for real, embodied reality.
We crave physical participation. And this is where we finally arrive at the massive success of Mumford & Sons.
Yes. Winston Marshall was the banjo player for Mumford & Sons, and they discuss how the band exploded into global popularity around the 2008 financial crash.
And they don't attribute that rise merely to catchy songwriting. They view it as a massive, unconscious cultural cry for physical participation. Look at the music industry leading up to 2008. It was the era of auto-tune, digital keyboards, highly synthetic pop.
It was the musical equivalent of the ballet. You sit back and marvel at the technological perfection.
But then Mumford & Sons arrives, bringing out acoustic instruments, banjos, heavy kick drums, raw vocals, and their live shows were an aggressive appeal to participation. They played with a stomping communal energy that completely shattered the barrier between the stage and the audience.
Against the backdrop of the 2008 global economic collapse, where opaque digital algorithms had just destroyed the housing market, people were desperate for authenticity.
They were starved for the feeling of the medieval village dance. The massive success of a banjo band in the digital age proves that the human craving for the real cannot be entirely engineered out of us.
To understand the scale of what we're up against, the framework brings back the concept of giants.
Right, we mentioned giants in the intro.
The functional meaning of a giant in ancient texts is metaphorical. A giant represents a physical greatness or a concentration of power that extends far beyond a single human body.
Like a sovereign king whose agency extends to encompass his entire city. The Leviathan.
Exactly. And today we have to recognize that we are actively building a new giant. Artificial intelligence is the new Leviathan. It's a synthetic giant extending its digital nervous system into every facet of our infrastructure.
So how do we survive in the shadow of this new giant? What is the actual strategy?
The framework offers a very clear call to action for the individual. And it isn't a political revolution. It is a rebellion of the ordinary.
The advice is to aggressively stop treating the world as a spectator sport.
You have to force yourself to re-engage with base reality. Get married, have children if you can, go to a physical church, go to a local dance, join a club.
You have to actively plant seeds of physical reality in an increasingly digital world. Build a life that an algorithm cannot replicate. What an incredible intellectual journey this has been.
It really covers everything.
Let's synthesize this. We started by tracing a philosophical fracture back to the 14th century, examining how William of Occam's separation of God from creation inadvertently turned the universe into a mechanical factory, making us passive spectators.
And we explored how that failure of materialism has paradoxically birthed a desperate hunger for the weird, culminating in an era where we are using supercomputers as giant divination machines.
Blindly stumbling into Moloch traps and risking an unprecedented era of techno-authoritarianism. But the counter-movement is a desperate, irrepressible human cry for physical, communal participation. Just the radical choice to build a local, embodied life.
To close out this analysis, I want to offer a final thought for you to ponder. If our screens and algorithms are essentially acting as modern crystal balls, mechanisms of chaos triggering our primal need for group possession, what happens when virtual reality and neural interfaces become completely indistinguishable from base reality? Will humanity use that technology to finally merge the spectator and the participant into some new form of community? Or will we simply be stepping inside an inescapable, perfectly simulated cathedral dedicated entirely to Moloch?
If the messy village dance moves entirely into a flawless metaverse, are we participants again, or have we just become the ultimate permanent spectators of our own simulation? That is a heavy, essential question to carry forward. Think about the areas in your own life where you have accepted being a spectator, and look for opportunities where you can boldly choose to be a participant. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the collapsing rational world and the aggressive return of the weird. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep looking for the real, and we will catch you next time.